everyone. Welcome to this week's bonus show. I am your host, Andrea Chalupa, a journalist and filmmaker and the writer and producer of the journalistic thriller, Mr. Jones, about Stalin's genocide famine in Ukraine. If you haven't seen it yet, why not? Anyhow, this week, Terrell Starr of the Essential Black Diplomats Podcast and Substack is on the show explaining basketball to me. So stick around for that important and lively conversation. It's actually one of our best ever. It's wonderful. We actually, for a minute, thought we did not record it because Terrell is in Ukraine, in Lviv, Ukraine, and the Russians have been bombarding the infrastructure there deliberately to terrorize Ukrainians in their attempt to conquer the entire country, make it unlivable. So Terrell's electricity, like many people based in Ukraine, has been unreliable. Luckily, we have this conversation saved. It is a great one about misogyny, racism, and this golden moment of women's basketball. Obviously, there's a lot of talk on this, but nothing like you've heard here on Gaslit Nation. Just a reminder, we have our big live taping this Tuesday, Orwell's birthday, June 25th. We're going to be celebrating with another fearless journalist, and that is Craig Unger, author of House of Trump, House of Putin, House of Bush, House of Saud, and American Compromat. The ladies of the Kremlin File podcast will be there to join me in that conversation, including Russian mafia expert Olga Lotman, who is an investigator who has helped Craig Unger with his reporting, including into Trump's decade-long dependency on the Russian mafia and all sorts of dirty Russian money. Come to that live taping. That's noon Eastern. Ask questions in the Q&A. I'm so excited for that. You have no idea. And then guess what? We all get to go through shortly after that. And that is the first debate between Trump and Biden. That will be Thursday, June 27th. I will be hanging out in the chat room for the Gaslit Nation Patreon community to basically hold hands with everyone. And there's also debate. I've been having some conversations with folks. Is Trump even going to show up? Because what else happens on June 27th? Prosecutors in the Manhattan DA's office give the judge their recommendation on whether Trump should go to prison or not. And if so, how many years did the prosecutors recommend to the judge? So that's a big mindfuck of a day for Trump. And I can't wait to see him hopefully take that debate stage, likely knowing through his lawyers. It's a very spicy case. So likely Trump will know Thursday night from his lawyers whether he's facing some serious prison time as part of that election interference case of hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. That was one of many election interference cases, along with the Mueller report and the Senate intelligence report on how the Kremlin broke serious laws, along with many in Trump's campaign and family, to bring the Trumps to power in 2016. And so it's going to be an interesting evening on June 27th. So let's all get through that debate together in the Gaslit Nation Patreon chat room. I will be there. We'll all be there sharing our reactions and holding each other, and I can't wait. And now, without further ado, here is my conversation with Terrell Starr of the Essential Black Diplomats Podcast and Substack. And if you want to hear the full thing, make sure that you're subscribed at the Truth Teller level tier or higher on patreon.com/gaslit. That's patreon.com/gaslit. And thank you to everyone who supports the show. We could not make Gaslit Nation without you. I want to ask you, Terrell, I do not follow sports because I just don't have the time to do it. I have 2 little kids and I've got a million projects. But one thing I'm forced to pay attention to because the buzz is so strong and the excitement is overwhelming is that WNBA, women's basketball, women's college basketball, is having a major moment. Men and women are losing their minds over the top talent in women's basketball today. And I think that is so exciting. And it reminds me of all the progress women have made over the last century. If you look at videos from the 1930s, 1940s, those Olympics, of what women's gymnastics used to be, it was basically stretching. it was stretching and, like doing jumping jacks or like a cartwheel. That was women's gymnastics 100 years ago back in the day. Now you look at women's gymnastics, Simone Biles, and it's full on defying gravity, a NASA space launch, twisting through the air and landing perfectly. And it's so mind bending to watch. And I feel like finally, after all these years, women's basketball is there and that heat is just going to grow hotter. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, so Caitlin Clark has really captivated everyone's attention for not only her play. By the way, she's a generational talent, all-time great college basketball player. And I'm saying this as somebody who actually has been, I watched the game of WNBA basketball, and it's really exciting. And I really was drawn to women's basketball by watching Dawn Staley at the University of South Carolina. I believe she's on championship number 3. The South Carolina basketball team, they defeated Iowa in the recent women's basketball championship. And so I started watching because of Dawn Staley, because she's definitely the best women's basketball coach of our generation and will likely go down as the greatest. But with Caitlin Clark, the reason why people are paying attention to her and why men are now paying attention to this sport when they never did, it has nothing to do with her basketball ability. It's really because she's a cause, right? And so with Caitlin Clark, she's from Iowa, one of the whitest states in the union, perhaps the whitest state in the union. I'm not exactly sure on that as a fact, but one of the whitest states in the country. And she is straight and she's considered this all-American girl, whereas she is in a league of Black women that are queer, that use they, them pronouns. And so I think a lot of this tension that a lot of male commentators are ginning up has very little to do with her play and more to do with, yes, we want this white woman to come in and put these, and I'm saying this in a pejorative way, basically these Black butch queens in their place. Basically, that's what people are saying. That's what they really are saying. And so it's one of the biggest cultural clashes that I have seen, regardless of the field. But she was recently, it was determined that she would not be a part of the USA basketball team. And a lot of commentators are saying that she should have been brought on for marketing purposes. And that doesn't make sense to me for one simple reason. Sports has been the only space, or one of the few spaces, where Black people can be assured that they will get their position based on their merit, right? And so when you have 12 spots on a team and then you bring in this college person who's not the greatest college player based on numbers, based on championships, and say that, hey, she's entitled to this role because of marketing, then that just undermines the integrity of basketball, which is what the women care about and what the WNBA care about and the Olympic Committee cares about. But what I see that's particularly strange to me is the attitude that men have who have not been paying attention to the sport, to say that these women who are managing the sport are doing it wrong. And it's like, it just makes me cringe as a man, because I'm like, okay, you're not coming in with expertise about this sport. You're not coming in with anything that really understands the nuances of why Caitlin Clark is getting this special attention over these other people. You are just interjecting and being insistent about your point of view because you feel entitled to being right, which is a very typical male thing to do. And Stephen A. Smith, most popular sports commentator out there, he is exhibit A of this. And the other men who are commentating on this sport are no different. But it's a big culture war. And we are seeing the very worst of people, and the misogyny is just reigning supreme.
Wow. And it just goes to show, the younger generations coming up. I know there's been alarming numbers looking at how incel, how misogynistic and far-right young white men are that are coming up. You had Charlie Kirk announcing at the Detroit Klan rally, Talking Points USA, that they had that it's a white boy summer. which is from Nick Fuentes, who's a straight up Nazi. And it's like every summer of Americans' history since the founding has been a white boy summer. It's like, you guys don't need your own summer. It's like, get out of here with that. You are perfectly safe. You've got a lot of unconscious bias on your side in Americans across this country, especially the police force. But you do see this younger generation, Gen Z, that is, across all the polling, very tolerant, very open-minded, very international facing, very progressive. They've seen the whole world already on TikTok. I did not have that growing up. When I was a kid in the 1980s, it was all white boy bands, like New Kids on the Block, like NSYNC, like 98 Degrees. My nieces, who are teenagers, preteens today, they're all into K-pop. Korean pop music. They're into Japanese anime. And this is just the universal trend of their generation. You go to Europe, you go to other places in the world, and you just see how huge anime is among these young people. So I just think these younger people coming up, and we see it in our sports stars, obviously with Caitlin Clark, they're going to be more aware and understanding of trans rights, transhumanity, and on the list it goes in terms of their level of tolerance. And so I do think that is really exciting for the culture. I do think that's really exciting for strengthening human rights in countries around the world, because they want to just be themselves and express themselves and just be chill and good with each other. And it's like they don't want to deal with these bullshit culture wars that are deliberately engineered by the far right to try to create a toxic environment, to try to ruin a perfectly good time and create problems where there aren't any.
Right. Because again, listen, as somebody, and I'm not saying I'm like a super duper WNBA fan, but once a week, so I'll catch a game. These people don't care about the game. That's my whole point. They are taking a sport that I will say Caitlin Clark did elevate the attention. She definitely did. And she is a generational talent. Listen, there's nothing that could be taken away from her as far as being an all-world basketball player. I think that if she goes down this path, she will go on and be a superstar in the WNBA. I just think an important thing to think about when you talk about culture wars, the WNBA is an activist league. And so you have a lot of the women who are very outspoken about George Floyd, about Black women who have been shot and killed by police officers. And so you see the women, if I'm not mistaken, were taking the lead on wearing the Black Lives Matter warm-up gear and having the floors Black Lives Matter before the men were. And so they also were people who were very open about being queer, about being gay, about being lesbian. And two, the thing about Caitlin Clark is that she's not one of those people who speak out about any of these issues because in her life, she's never had to. And because she's 22 years old, I'm not going to ride her hard, but I will say that there are college basketball players like Paige Bueckers, who's at the University of Connecticut, who I watch and is one of my favorite players, not because of her game, because I like her values, right? Cameron Brink, and these are white women, right? And Cameron Brink, who is the center for the LA Sparks, she too is outspoken about social justice in ways that Caitlin Clark isn't. Now, my favorite player that I like is Angel Reese, and so she's a power forward for the Chicago Storm, I believe, may be getting that wrong. But the point of it is that this woman has faced so much racial abuse online. They have called this Black woman all kinds of horrible things. And what disappoints me is that everyone is treating Caitlin Clark like she's the damsel in distress. And it really plays into all of the stereotypes of white womanhood and men across the board, white men, Black men, everyone, they're playing into it. And that's the part that makes it uncomfortable. And that's where it's no longer a sport anymore because we're not talking about their play. None of these conversations have been about Caitlin Clark. While she's a great player, I think she has one of the highest turnover rates in the league. And also the fact that people are saying, how come she's not on the Olympic team when Candace Parker was on the Olympic team, even though she won back-to-back championships in college, in addition to being the MVP of the league in her rookie year, which is a feat in itself. And then there was another woman who made the Olympic team as a rookie, but she came off having multiple championships at the University of Connecticut as well. And her name evades me, but like, you can't have an intelligent conversation off the court about Caitlin Clark unless you understand race and understand gender. And that's the problem. It's a bunch of men who are dominating this conversation, and they don't know anything about gender. And it's just been very painful to see. And I just see it progressively getting worse, because even though Caitlin Clark didn't sign up to be a culture war representative, that's what she is for many more people who are watching the sport for the reason that they should.